All right, so this is the Gulli Bot team meeting for June 7th. I was thinking, is it June or July?
Still June.
June 7th. Just a second, 7th. So I had initially on the agenda, I had intros.
I saw that Mike's not able to make it again, so.
Yeah, well, so I actually had hired another person to work on claims, but she got a full-time job and wanted to focus on that. So
Okay, well, good for her for finding one.
yeah, but I have another person that I'm talking to, so we'll see. Eventually we'll get at least 2 people working on it. So do you have any, and then I just thought we'd do general Q&A, but that may not be necessary because we're not introducing someone, but just before we dive into all this stuff, do you have any questions or topics that you want to add? Or?
Not in a general Q&A sense.
Okay. We'll probably hit those. Yeah, let me go ahead and just do a quick run through of Google Drive. Of course, there's no way of doing this without my whole Google Drive showing up in the recording. I guess there's nothing proprietary in there. Yeah, that'll be okay. So this is the Gulli Bot folder that I've given you access to.
Yeah, I started the meeting notes at the top level because I wasn't certain which subheader we wanted to put it on. You can always move it later.
So I did end up, yeah, so I think I moved it already. Or you talk, so, well, okay, let me go through this real quick because they're in order. Change my headset real quick. Okay, get a little bit less echo that way. So the Z archive, that's just an archive folder of the old stuff I've done, and Z underscore just so, well, it's supposed to sort to the bottom actually. Yeah, in alphabetical. So and then I have a voice application, which for some of the videos I might want to generate Gulli Bot's voice, and so that's a tool to do that. I thought I had the instructions on how to use it in here, but I don't see it. Anyways, and then public comment, that's just to remind us that anything in this folder is open to the public, and that's where most everything is going to be.
Apparently I wasn't a public comment when I made it. I thought I was at the top level. Oh, easy enough move.
Wait, I'm sorry, I couldn't quite hear that. Say that again.
I thought that I was on the top level when I made it with meeting notes, but apparently I was not.
So I also, what I did is I put the meeting notes under process, meeting agendas, and here, and I changed it to agendas instead of notes because I'm thinking we don't really need to take copious notes. If we ever want to reference back, we can come back to the video. So I actually already kind of made one for today. So if you want to,
should I not worry about taking notes other than some general ones on the agenda then?
Yeah, so if we feel like we need to like record a decision, or if there's just some notes, we can take them on here. But I wouldn't worry about it unless you feel it's necessary. So I think mainly it's an agenda, just unless you like doing that. But
no, it's distracting, so the agenda is better for me.
Yeah. And then what I'd like to do, although I don't know if this is important or not is that we'll be doing YouTube videos. It might be easier later to find these. So if we wanted to, we could put in timestamps. Is there an easy way in here to see where we are in the recording?
I don't believe there is. At least not until afterwards, which would defeat the purpose of it.
Yeah. Let's see if the chat. No, it gives the current time. It doesn't give you the time. That's one of the problems also. I have a small app we made that takes the chat transcript from Zoom, but linking it up with the video is a bit painful because the timings are not, there's no way to sync them up. You have to manually figure out the delta and the time.
Yeah, I think the closest we'd be able to get would be to mark the time when we hit record, and then estimate based off of that.
Yeah. So in theory, if we wanted to, we could, I don't know, actually, I can't remember. I guess it's in seconds, isn't it? That'd be a pain. Or is it minutes and seconds? YouTube,
I think it's minutes and seconds.
Okay, so I mean, we could, like, this could have just been a, you know, just to get close to it, do it after the hour. So I don't know that, and then we could just copy and I could copy, you know, whoever posts the video could copy and paste the whole thing. So we can see if that's needed or not. Anyways, so to kind of look at the, let's see. So in the public comment section, I have the experiments folder is just some thoughts on things we might do later on. So I was working on, or I was thinking about doing at one point, I put on hold. So these are like a debate event, getting funding from the future fund. So as we like look for funding or do different kind of just little things that we need to keep notes on, that's kind of, the experiments is kind of like a catch-all. Process would be, of course, anything kind of process related. So this is kind of the claims process, our editorial guide that some contractors helped me with before, an onboarding document, the skills check document that I was using for hiring. I remember. Oh, SM, social media responses. So these are kind of like Gulli Bot's responses, and they're a bit potential Gulli Bot responses, and they're a bit snarky. But you know, it's kind of delving into Gulli Bot's, or giving an example of Gulli Bot's personality. Yeah. And mainly some of these might be like just errors that if people are just blatantly being trolling, or we feel like they're trolling, you know, that's a judgment call. You know, we might have some standard kind of error responses that we could rotate through. Anyway, so that's a reference doc that we can build on. So, and then the meeting agenda. So this is where we put any documents on how to populate Gulli Bot and stuff. Sites, so anything with the website and probably technology as well. So these are like drafts for blogs, branding document, terms of service, some of the original docs for that, video scripts, stuff like that. And then the blog, I have some of these may have been posted. I don't know, I'd have to look. They're probably just ideas. Oh, the search feature has been posted. But that's mainly what it's for. And then topics is kind of, I probably need to think of a better word than this, but there are ideas that could be debates. And this is where we might need to store some information about it. Now, I guess most of this is in the future going to be in the Airtable base. So this was kind of before I was using Airtable. But if we need to store information that can't really be structured in Airtable, like if you're, if there's some PDFs that aren't referenceable on the internet because they're behind a paywall or something, this is where we might store. Although actually you could store those in Airtable as well. So we'll just have to see. This may not be useful much more in the future.
Yeah, I could potentially envision us using it if we need to have a team discussion about one of the topics to figure out our approach to it.
Yeah, good place for it. Yeah, so that's basically it, I think. I think that's the main folders in here. Yeah, so kind of anything else we have. The main thing we're probably going to be filling out is this kind of process folder where, like, how are we going to onboard people and stuff. And onboarding would be both contractors and volunteers. This might get some like that in the future. Cool. Any questions about the drive?
No, I think that covers it for now. I imagine that there's going to be more as we go forward where we have to figure out what new thing we didn't envision goes where, but
yeah,
that's a given.
Yeah. So in the Airtable base, you've already been in here putting things in claims, putting things in quotes. So those are pretty, you understand all that. I put a new one in here for debate topics, and this is really just a dumping ground. So that doesn't have to be real accurate or well organized. This is more kind of just a brainstorming area. So these are the ideas. I think some of these were I think I pulled these from suggestions you had, and then kind of like what the progress is. I just thought of just doing general tags, and they can be two in there. So if we thought one was society and government or whatever, or government and health, if it's like a policy about health, then we might tag it under both, rather than having a really strict hierarchy. But we can improve that over time.
Yeah, interesting that it allows more than one, but only two. Would have figured it'd either be a choose one or choose an arbitrary number.
It's many.
Oh, it is many. Okay.
Display very well.
Okay, when you said two, I thought you meant that was a hard limit.
Oh, yeah, no, yeah, that just wasn't clear. And then sometimes we'll already have kind of a quote that triggered this, like maybe that's a good debate topic, and then so you can tie this to the quotes. Also, any questions on debate topics?
No, it's pretty straightforward. Doesn't have a lot of restrictions on it.
Yeah, and then tasks is just kind of everything else that we might need to do in our just tasks that we're going to assign each other. This would be more useful also when you start working on development, because we'll use this as a regular software Kanban board. It's like in progress, it's supposed to be improving claim navigation. And I don't have much more out there. We have quite a bit of ideas. I put kind of a priority 0 to 5, or I guess technically 1 to 5. I don't know. Yeah, you can have nothing, but nothing means not filled out. So yeah, 1 to 5 priority in general. But also Airtable allows supporting of actual order of records, so we can sub-organize them. Just general notes. Notes can include hyperlinks, so that's a good place to put stuff. Status is just the Kanban column that's in. We can assign it to people. At some point, we might want to be reviewing each other's work. So I have a review column in there, and then just once again, just kind of general tags to keep things organized. So if it's technology, then it's probably something you and I will be looking at. I have a tag in here for the beta launch, so I'm thinking that we'll do kind of another launch, consider everything before this alpha, and then kind of, this is the new Gulli Bot. So we're just calling it beta launch for now. And then there'll be social media tasks as something else that's in there, and blog content, which is kind of like social media, but it's a little different. And then you can have prerequisites just in case something has to happen first. It can have a parent just in case we have epics that have children. There was a few that I saw are going to be that way. And then I don't know if we're going to need an attachments column. That may just be left over from the default thing. So yeah, so that's tasks. I have I made my own Kanban thing in here, so feel free to, if you want to be able to just see your stuff, you might go ahead and make one. Bait launch, that's great. So dyslexia there. So it's just a quick one to look at everything that I think we need to do for the beta launch. Yeah. So any questions on tasks?
I haven't used a Kanban format before, but I imagine I'll be able to adjust to it. It looks pretty clear now that I'm actually looking at the tasking.
Yeah. So
actually,
yeah,
no, I did back in the Microsoft job just very infrequently. Come to think of it.
Yeah, so you can just kind of drag them, between that state, and things generally progress from left to right. Although it's interesting, Max, my coworker at my day job, kind of actually decided it really needs to go the cards need to go the other way, because what you're doing is you're kind of like going forward through time from left to right, and the cards would be staying kind of still as you work your way through the task. They might change order. That was an interesting concept, but right now this is in the traditional format. Yeah. Right now we have a whole bunch of ideas, and we can just move them over to waiting when we've kind of like talked about, we know what we need to do, and then to do when you're doing it. Or, well, let me see. I'm sorry. It's usually moved from idea to do, but they can move back to waiting if there's some sort of blocker. We're waiting on an external event to happen. Okay, so in the claims, we have a new column that I added the other day called confidence, percent confidence. And that is, I'm going to use reason score as an example, because it actually turns out that Gulli Bot, the UI is a little messed up. That's one of the things we need to fix. So the confidence score is this, which this is a graphic representation of it, but there's 33%. The scale for confidence, I think, is -100 to 100%. So negative would be on the side of being kind of proven wrong. 0 would be undecided. But the way things appear in Gulli Bot, so like this is -99%, but this is it depends, because we're talking about these ones are showing displaying the actual impact on its parent as opposed to its actual score. So this one's getting a 200% because it has a ×2 multiplier. So technically this confidence, I think the number that I put in there is actually the 100, and we can actually look.
So I think it makes sense visually.
Yeah. Yeah, and we're also, when we get into the UI, we're going to talk about the subtleties of what to display. There's no perfect answer for that, unfortunately. So fictional city, 3,300, 100. Yeah, so none of these show 200%. So for Gulli Bot,
Yeah, none showed 99% either.
yeah, I think on Gulli Bot I coded it so it doesn't show 100%. Although that's funny, it's plus 200 as opposed to plus 198. I think I have it coded to not show 100% because that's just too triggering to people. But that's like a visualization thing. By default, the system's at 100%.
I don't know. Given that it's meant to be robotic, it seeming to deal in absolutes when there is nothing contrary would, I think, fit the theme for it.
Yeah. Yeah, I can't remember when I may have made that decision before Gulli Bot, like when it was just reason score. But he also, or it needs to also feel humble a little bit. So 90%, 99% might give a sense of wiggle room. But that's one of the things that we'll discuss is whether we want to pull that out. But this is putting in the actual confidence scores, not the adjusted ones. So, but that's what it does. And then go ahead.
I do also think that given that one of the points is vacancy exactly how we calculate it, showing
if someone does some math and realize the numbers are different.
Yeah, those fudging it would seem like it would reduce trust in that to at least some degree. Probably more of a degree than is actually warranted, just because it's a visual indicator that we are putting a thumb on things, even if it's just for something minor like that.
Yeah, that's a good point. So to get these percent confidences to show up, I've got this app, the Gulli Bot Airtable app, and it runs the data in this Airtable against the process, and so you can see it starts putting in the numbers there. Oh, it shows me as the last modified. That's interesting.
That makes sense if you're attached to the app.
I guess I modified it. Yeah. And I don't know if we want to continually making a new view. I find it easier if you have a view set aside specifically for what the one you're working on.
Probably will be or soon. I was just going with the whole thing right now since it's not hugely long, but going back and forth just between two is already getting a little more complex.
Yeah. Now it's interesting. So right now, the score for your concealed carry is 0, which is, I guess, kind of what you expected when you were doing the.
That's not what I'd expect from what we have. I think I know why that is, though. I think it's because the tier, but actually, no, that would make sense.
Well, what were you expecting? Above 0 or below 0?
Definitely below 0, since a significant portion of their claims are that there is no effect. The second highest is that are against the claim, and both of those would be skeptical. No effect or against the claim would both be skeptical of a positive claim.
So, right. So, since not all claims can, not all, like if you, well, just in general, not all claims actually reverse properly. If you're saying that this is a reason why, I had a really good example yesterday in the canonical debate lab. Anyways, I can't remember, but not all claims actually reverse properly. So right, unless we specifically designate something as reversible, and I guess I gotta put that in this claim table, it won't go below 0. So it'll be negative 100 because it's a con, but it won't go this. So it's lopping off at 0 because it's not set as reversible. But also what we'd want to do is Gulli Bot, when Gulli Bot flips to the other side, rather than Gulli Bot saying, in general, rather than saying this is false, I'm thinking right now, although this is up for debate, is that generally Gulli Bot would phrase it in the other way and flip the whole thing around. So it could be just as easy as concealed carry does not reduce crime rates. Just as a matter of kind of process and not having kind of like double negatives. You want, because sometimes when people are, one of the reasons for that is that people don't always look at the score. And so if we had false concealed carry reduces crime rates, there's been some studies showing they just remember that it reduces crime rates, even if you say it's false. So just to help with that, concealed carry doesn't reduce crime rates would be what we change it to and flip everything around. Unfortunately, right now, it's a very manual process. I think you'd have to flip the first two, the top level claims. And then I think, no, you'd have to, because we're doing this by team, you'd have to go in and reverse all the children and grandchildren.
That's something that we would really want to be able to happen automatically.
Yeah. And I've been toying with, so one of the options we also would do is if we had the quote, or if we had the claim text, if we had kind of like the pro claim text, the con claim text, and then as a question, then the UI could pick whichever one as it is. So as it flips back and forth, it could do it all. I just haven't gotten around to kind of figuring out that.
Yeah, and that would make it easier that if it is going to flip, it would just reverse Gulli and Skepti on all of them going down.
Yeah.
But actually, let me clarify, just to make sure I was doing it correctly. Skepti is referring to the top level claim always, not the one that it's responding to.
Right.
Okay, cool. I wanted to make sure.
Well, yeah, I mean, well, so yeah, Skepti is the side of the debate. So you have Gulli Bot on one side and Skepti on the other. So yeah, they're always pro or con the top claim.
Yeah, that's the way I was doing it. I was pretty sure I was right. I just wanted to make absolutely sure. Yeah, I do. It does sound like that would be easier too, because that way, at the very start, we've figured out the phrasing for how to reverse it, rather than trying to do it in some programmatic way that would definitely end up messy.
Yeah, yeah, and that's the thing is, yeah, I want to do it manual for a little bit, make sure that first of all that we want to do that before we wrote all that code, and then also we know whether we got it right or wrong.
That also or sets it up so that people are from the very beginning, if there's manual entry or suggestion, thinking of it as representing both sides, trying to give the clearest encapsulation of the arguments for and against as a single claim. Not arguments, but people thinking of how to best phrase either side as the pro and con at the start.
Yeah, and we can definitely change how it's done also if we find out, or just maybe even displaying both, because we could have team, but then we could also have pro parent, con parent, pro main, con main. We could do it any way we want.
Yeah, if we're going to decide that deciding it early is going to make it a lot easier on us over time.
We want to decide early.
If we want to structure it so that we have basically two main claims, having that set up at the beginning would, I think, be easier for going forward than having to adjust things later on.
Yeah, I mean, it's always a balance between adjusting things later or potentially doing a significant amount of work that you're never going to use. But we should be able to make that decision pretty soon.
Okay. And actually, now that I think about it, that's probably not actually that hard to retroactively or fix compared to a lot of things.
Yeah. Yeah, it also depends on the amount of work. So it's interesting. Why do some of these not have confidence? I don't know if you can even see what I'm trying to do here. It's kind of small. So this is your concealed carry, reduces crime rates. I don't know why it doesn't have confidence on here. Maybe it's not showing if it's 0%. That's really annoying. I mean, I guess if you're doing something that you want, trying to keep visually not taking up much space.
I mean, they shouldn't ever be treating 0 as not present.
I mean, yeah, ideally. Yeah, I didn't even look when we started talking about this. Let's take a look at qualified immunity and see where we are on this. So this is the debate now, and there's 3 debates on here because I don't have it filtered. Actually, let's go ahead and filter that for qualified immunity. Grade view, qualified immunity. There we go. Now, so there's going to be some kind of like guidelines that are not very strict, but in general, I think at the I guess I can't say top level. Top level is the main claim, but the first kind of set of children,
Mhm.
I would like to keep it at around a handful, so like 5 to 10, 1 to 2 handfuls. Although this may be 10.
I think it's a little over.
Yeah, but also we got to keep in mind that when we're grouping and stuff like that, it does affect the scores.
Mhm.
So it's not worthwhile grouping. But I guess a good question is, does this score at 34% sound reasonable?
It does to me. I think that the Supreme Court would probably disagree, but they are, as from what I can see in the debate, an outlier. And we're going to be finding that reasonably often right now, I think, unfortunately.
Yeah. So we could look at combining some of these if and see how it affects the score.
I could spend a while at this point since I have a decent amount of initial data going into a deeper dive of how to arrange argument chains rather than just collecting claims that may or may not be as related to each other. Because I do see the value in having them each as a sub debate going back and forth. I think that we are going to lose some level of not quite specificity, but close to that by specifically making things back and forth when they aren't necessarily directly responding to each other, but we can find things that are more in the same vein.
Well, so yeah, I mean, so once again, the actual kind of quotes and the claims we put in there can be very different. So if we find ourselves wanting to group two things that aren't quite related, we can break it apart or rephrase it or have it go on a different logical basis to make them actually fit together. Does that make sense?
It does, but changing what the argument is in order to make it fit into the chain feels like it's prioritizing the wrong goal.
Well,
we want
so what I would say though is that they were most likely arguing incorrectly initially, and we're finding the real argument. Is the hope. So we're being guided by the logic of the top layer on what the argument should have been on the bottom layer, because we've got to remember they're arguing without any structure whatsoever. So we are going to end up having a different kind of logic structure.
We do have a good compare and contrast here in that the concealed carry one is much more based off of studies that are done rather than like social media posts, because there's just fewer people making social media posts about concealed carry than qualified immunity right now with fewer specific claims.
Well, yeah, I did see a few things that I want to kind of use as an example real quick on this before we jump to that. This will be a deterrent against individual police officers using excessive force. And this one's about preventing or reducing maybe police violence and misconduct. So those are probably the same thing. But not exactly the same thing, but those could be under the same heading. Or actually,
yeah, those were two that Michael had added, so I hadn't adjusted his.
Okay, right. Yeah, so we might have a few more of those. Yeah, see, I almost feel like that before we kind of publish this, it's almost like there's a couple of rounds of us going through every claim in it and its position and thinking about the logic. Does it overlap with any others? And then spending a little time kind of living with it and then come back and look at it again.
Yeah, I agree with that.
That's kind of what I hope this time would be, but I think we are gonna, I don't know if you want to take another swing at it to incorporate.
Yeah, given that I hadn't been
thinking through that.
like include or re-encompassing Michael's claims into the arguments as much either, it'd be good for me to do a crack at it and then us to take a look. I do also think that having, particularly once we have multiple researchers, time specifically where we get our heads together and talk through the arguments or chains that we have would be good.
Yeah, having multiple people certainly helps with that. Let me filter this down to just be yours real quick. Oh, that doesn't work because you're not the top one.
That makes sense. The filter would work that way.
Let's see. I haven't played with these. I think I'm the top client. Nope.
I think that one thing that will also make this a bit easier is once I go through and just generate my own claim for what the top level header should be.
Mm-hmm.
Like, we may not have seen somebody specifically saying this will make it more difficult for police departments administratively, but or several of these would specifically fall under that header. People just wanted to say the or child claims rather than the top level claim, because talking about administrative difficulties by itself is boring.
Yeah. And there's one you were reusing in here. Am I remembering correctly?
Reusing?
Yeah, I thought there was a claim that had two parents. And maybe that wasn't intentional.
I think I had to duplicate. If I had two parents, then I think that was accidental, because I don't think I intended to enter that.
It can be allowed. Also shared between like main claims, but also within the same main claim, there's a few edge cases where something needs to happen most time. Like if you're talking about climate change or something, there's some studies that would apply to multiple, not just the evidence of the study, but the claim made in the study could apply to multiple things. But then
Yeah,
also
you were right about that. I just didn't think I had
versa,
any in this case.
Yeah, that may have just been. Let's see if we got any. Yeah, it looks like this one has two. I think that's what this. Oh yeah, there we go. Yeah, so there's one where it's in there twice. So you might just look at that and see whether maybe that one just needs to be moved.
It's current QI. Don't justify the means to lead off. Yeah, I don't think I intended to link those.
Yeah. Okay, so you want to take another crack at that. Let's talk. And can you just confirm that you can see this this Gulli Bot Airtable and the process buttons there?
Yes, I can see it.
Okay, great. So whenever you move the claims around, if you want to see what the score is again, just click that. It doesn't do much if no data changes. It runs fast enough that it doesn't even pop up the little spinner. So I need to put a little notification that says, "Hey, it did actually do something," but just to warn you that it's not great UI.
Okay, I see why I didn't realize that that one had two parents. That was also one of Michael's.
Okay, yeah.
But I'll be doing another pass anyway, so I'll just do that as a group.
Yep. So let's take a quick look at duplicate, change this one to what do you call it? Good guy with a gun? What's your main claim for the guns?
For the top level,
yeah. Let's see.
I mean, a lot of these are going to be yeah, that's probably the best. Oh, I did have a thought in here. Like, there's a very commonly cited or set of numbers for how many people protect themselves with guns, and the numbers are blatantly false, but it is a claim that is often used. Should we err against using something that is so demonstrably false, or should we include it and then include all the reasons why it's so false?
No, we should definitely include it if
okay.
It's popular.
Okay. Yeah, so I need to go grab that one then. It is, in a way, a good barometer, because any website that is using those numbers is making it very clear that they are not spacing their positions in actual science. It's very much they feel that it is true number rather than it has evidence that it is true number.
Yeah, and yeah, I think they would think they're basing it off science. They just didn't go back and check their sources, really, right? They just copied it off another website. I mean, they're not going deep.
Yeah, well, it's included on websites that build themselves as professional think tanks, for example.
Yeah. Yeah, it'd be interesting when you gather that up on why it's false to see if they have a response to that. So that'd be something, it'd be neat to engage with them on Twitter.
I haven't seen any response to the criticisms of it yet.
But yeah, definitely include that one. That'll be interesting.
Okay, now give me a series of claims for a mostly one-sided arguments. Because they're all kind of piling on against this one common claim.
Okay.
Yeah, this is pretty representative here, actually, since there is really one researcher, or it was a pair originally, but it's one now, that is widely cited for claiming that more guns equals less crime. And very few people have been able to reproduce as evidence. And it's somewhat more often that they, with the same data, find that the opposite conclusion is correct. So that there would be a bunch of people responding to one like fairly influential claim here is pretty representative of the science right now.
And you'll be kind of deduping all those different debunkings so that, so we're not repeating claims.
Yeah, it is unfortunate that there's only really 2, maybe 3 layers to it, since there was that one initially very influential study. There was a national research, it's like National Research Commission or some organization that's geared towards this that tried to bring the experts together to reach a consensus, since they found that the original study was problematic but influential, and they found that they just couldn't. And then people who continued trying to do it with new data afterwards. It does, but they don't really respond to each other past that tier.
Yeah. Although we could, once we kind of get it all documented, we can reach out to those people and say, like, I could reach out to my dad and say, what have you seen? Because
well, and again, these are mostly scientific papers, so I don't know how much luck we would have with the individual scientists responding. Maybe would.
Well, they have been, but it's not. The next layer isn't another scientist responding. The next layer is some armchair quarterback guy who looked at the paper and said, "Oh, this doesn't include, it doesn't like this. This is for mass shootings. The mass shootings have killed over 7 people, but in the cases where there was a good guy with a gun, the guy was shot before he could kill 7 people."
Mass shootings, I'll probably find a little bit more of that than specifically concealed carry. When I look for concealed carry, it really was just people saying and concealed carry and people talking about how proud they are of their concealed carry. There was very little engagements in that one.
Yeah. Although part of the project is to increase engagement, so we can hit them up and see why they believe it. Although it's right, they probably have never thought past that, but it'd be interesting to see is when we say, okay, here's a study that debunks what you said, and here's a debunking of the other study. What do you think? Are they still, I mean, most of the time I think they're going to come back and say, well, that's not a reason for me not to want to harm myself, because I feel
I do think that at some point we may want to have a conversation. There's some pretty good data that the conservative versus the progressive brains are wired differently when it comes to that sort of factual and counterfactual presentation.
Yeah, I'm familiar with that, so we can dive into it more and discuss the impacts of that.
Yeah, based off of the data we have, we just expect different results to here is a study with information that goes against your viewpoint, depending on what the initial viewpoint was. And
Yeah.
I don't know how we would
Now, right,
possibly account
yeah.
for that.
Well, yeah, well, the challenges with all those studies is that the information density on the information that was provided was very shallow. So no one's tested this. I mean, it's a good reason to think that this may not work. But when we test this, we might find that it has a different efficacy rate than
Yeah.
other forms of
Yeah,
data.
I think it wouldn't necessarily be a sign that this won't work. It would be speaking to the breadth of audience we can expect for whom it would work. Because those results are on average, not defining every person in the group.
Yeah,
So
but what I'm thinking is though is that this should have a higher percentage of people. The goal is that this would have a higher percentage of people than found in those studies. That makes sense?
hopefully, and
Yeah,
you would hope that the
that's the
format
goal.
where it gives them an entry point that is agreeing with them would lead them to want to engage with it a bit more to see where the lines are going.
Yeah, so we'll see. Is there a reason for normally when I see just one child claim, I kind of think, should we just move all these up one level? Did you have that because you thought there might be more, or is there a reason why you wanted to do that? Can you see?
In this case, it was, yeah, in fact, this probably should be swapped around. It was because there were those sorts of three levels of it. The top one was the National Research Council bringing the experts together initially. The one below it is the specific claim that that one was responding to, which means that if I was going sequentially, probably should have been swapped. And all the bottom ones are largely in response to that one influential claim above. But that's more looking at the historical structure of the debate rather than the, I guess, ontological structure of it.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, this probably can be rearranged.
But also, I think we could take one out. So you could either combine the wordings of these two.
No, those definitely need to exist separately since there's really three results here rather than two. That concealed carry deters crime, doesn't have an effect on crime, or increases crime. There's more nuance beyond that, but those are the three primary conclusions that are reached. So that would probably suggest that there should either be one primary subclaim and then three branching off of that, or there should be three branching off initially and then the debates coming out from there. They're very
Right, yeah.
interconnected, though, is the problem, because they're all directly responding to each other.
Well, yeah, so I mean, so there will be situations where you need this structure, but that's kind of a smell if you know the software technology thing. So like when you see this structure, you need to dig a little deeper and make sure that that's absolutely necessary. So I would think in general breaking this up into three, or maybe reversing these, right, and then breaking it up into three, whichever is appropriate. If we tried to break this up into the three different claims, well, so like one claim saying it increases, one claim saying it decreases, one claim saying it says same. I mean, so that's normally how you'd break something down. But I think in Gulli Bot that may not be. I mean, in the end, we're talking about.
And
Okay,
I guess
so
part of oh, go on. You're in the middle of thought.
so Gulli Bot has that kind of built into the scoring system. So a positive side says that it'll be increasing something, a negative means it's decreasing, and zero means it's the same. But there's a nuance there to where zero saying it'll be the same has no impact. But in this case, they're literally saying zero is what it should be, and it should have an impact. So that's a problem with the math that I've been thinking about. But in theory, Gulli Bot's scoring system might combine those three into one.
Yeah, that does suggest
but
a
maybe not.
fundamental issue there, that the null hypothesis should probably be what it defaults to at 0, rather than the null hypothesis being a counterpoint to the default hypothesis. That's
Well,
being poorly
yeah,
phrased.
you can't. You can't mathematically do that, unfortunately,
Mhm.
because if everything starts out at 0, it could never drag it. You put a child,
Oh,
it's a
okay.
0.
Yeah, no, I just realized a pretty major problem with how this is set up, because if the top two possible would be concealed carry reduces crime rates and concealed carry increases crime rates, if a significant portion of the evidence is saying that concealed carry doesn't have any impact on crime rates, that'd be skeptic to both of those possible ones. So if we flop between them, we wouldn't be reversing Gulli and skeptic at that point.
Well, no, I mean, that would be okay, because what it would do is it would drag the score towards 0, which is what you want it to be, because you want it to be, well, no,
No, I wouldn't.
you don't want it to, because you don't want it to be undecided. You want it to be decided that it's not affecting it. So I think even though they break it up into those 3 things, or their arguments are broken up in that sort of thing, the real question is it's not like Gulli is saying it'll reduce and Skeptic is saying it'll increase. Gulli is saying that it will increase, and Gulli's Bot saying that it won't increase. So Gulli's includes the null, and I mean Skeptic includes the null and the negative, because it's the opposite of the positive. It's not just the negative.
That would still mean that we couldn't just have the two possible results for it to flop between and automatically swap skeptic and Gulli down below.
Well, what I'm saying is that any claim down here that's saying, okay, let's say Gulli Bot's saying concealed carry reduces crime rates.
Yeah, here it would be, oh man, no, that doesn't quite work still. I was about to say that here would be a good example of when having two parents would be useful, because something saying that there isn't an impact would be a good response to both, or either positive or negative claim. But it still would be problematic for it to swap between skeptic and Gulli if we were trying to swap the top level ones like we'd been talking about earlier. Did that make sense, or do I need to phrase that better?
I think you phrased it fine. I think I was reading when you were talking, and I think I need to go through this specific example. Let me interject with, so what I was thinking is that anything that's saying, so if Gulli is saying it reduces crime rates, anyone who's saying that it doesn't affect the crime rates is on the skeptic side. Right? So
yeah,
both that it increases crime rate or that it stays the same are skeptic, and then for it to be on Gulli's side, it has to show an increase, right?
Yeah, but then if Gulli Bot decided that, oh, it reducing crime rates isn't what I believe, I'd rather say concealed carry increases crime rates, it would remain skeptic for that one as well. Other claims would swap, but that claim would remain skeptic.
Right. Well, right. So this is one of the challenges, that Gulli wouldn't swap to say concealed carry increases crime rates. Gulli would swap to say concealed carry doesn't reduce crime rates.
Oh, okay, so I think that was my misunderstanding before.
I probably said it wrong, but yeah,
No,
because that's really the intent of the thing, is that that's the argument that the humans are making too.
Mm-hmm.
So Gulli just kind of switches from Democrat to Republican.
Would that put us in a position where people would I feel like that does put us in a little bit of an awkward position deciding whether or not we're going to have the initial claim being it reduces or it increases, since choosing which of those I feel like would look like bias either direction,
Well,
regardless of how it works out.
if you're saying, well, I mean, the concealed carry advocates would say, how would they phrase it themselves? I think they would say, oh, I'm sorry. How do the gun, let's just say liberals in this case, because that's kind of the tendency. If they're saying, how would they phrase it? They would say concealed carry doesn't reduce crime rates, right? Or would they say,
They'd say both, I think, that it doesn't reduce crime rates and that either it makes us less safe or it increases crime rates. I think less safe is probably the more common phrasing, but that's also not
yeah, but
directly in line.
I guess it would be okay for us because the other side isn't claiming. Yeah, so I don't think that it so much shows a bias because it is one of the ways they phrase it, but it would be helpful if we phrased it in such a way that it could be easily reversed, as long as it's not unfair to either side. So I think it'd be okay because they would say, because they're really debunking this claim that it reduces crime rates.
Well, here's a question then. Would we be in a position where we would need to have concealed carry increases crime rates as a separate top level claim? Because if the possibility is concealed carry doesn't reduce crime rates, either because it doesn't have an effect on it or because it actually increases crime rates, we can only, if we only have concealed carry reduces crime rates as a top level, we don't end up with the affirmative statement as a possibility.
Right. Yes. In general, yeah, I think that there will be times where there's a cluster of claims and they overlap and they do actually reuse the child claims. So I think it would be useful to have a claim that says it increases and saying it doesn't reduce, as for someone who wanted to debate against someone who's saying that it reduces. Yeah. So in the short run, yeah, it'd be interesting to have both and then to have the claims reused. Now in my current database format, I was keeping it simple, having this claims table be its own table with a parent in there. And even though you can have multiple, you can have multiple parents in this, but the challenge is that what it affects and the team it's on is also on the same record. The better data structure, which I toggle back and forth between using, is to have an actual like edges or joins table. And then you could say in this, when this claim is talking about this other claim, on that join, it either affects confidence or importance, and it's either a pro or a con. And in that case, you have to say, no, you don't have to ignore that. So this data structure is overly simplified. So if we're going to start reusing claims between main claims, we would probably need to add another table.
Yeah, and this is one of those decisions that if not made early on, it leads to a large amount of work if we have to swap later.
I think I could write a query. I would take the existing data and throw it in a new table. It's not that hard. I end up doing a lot of that stuff. So I'm not too worried about it. But the hard thing is kind of training individuals, because a lot of people don't. It's easier for you, I think, than if I was training someone who has no experience in thinking about data structures.
I agree. The question is, how much are we sacrificing in the end in order to do it this way?
Well, so I still kind of see it as an experiment. So like right now, I would say we don't because we could build out these 5 claims and we can't get any interaction on social media. No one's reading it. It doesn't even feel like, without doing a study, that anyone's being convinced. And then I just shut the project down. So what I'd like to do is probably get through these 5 claims and then
Yeah, and if it's only 5, then refactoring is not that big a concern.
Yeah, although, yeah, we'll see. I might do it sooner, like you're suggesting. We might do it sooner, but let's give it a little bit longer and see what we find. But yeah, so for now, for these 5 claims, I think having it reverse just by saying concealed carry. Now the question is, maybe for now, even though, is it okay if I set this one to be reversible? So it will go to a negative number, so we don't have to figure out that whole flipping back and forth thing. Now also Gulli Bot could just say false. Once it reaches 0%, it's false. It doesn't matter how false it is, it's false. And I actually thought I had it to where the top claim could always go negative. But maybe I
Yeah, that one I have no
have to
idea.
look. Yeah, so I think I have to look at my code. Because I'm actually surprised that doesn't go negative. It might be that I'm in my code somewhere else that I'm not using it. I have it set it as reversible. Okay, so actually, let me go down here.
And I do have another somewhat related question here that I want to make sure I get to before the end.
That's good.
Would now be a good time for that, or do we want to keep going on this?
Nah, I think we're good. At some point, I want to check to make sure that you feel like you have enough work between now and the next meeting. And also, we probably need to discuss, do we want to have 2 meetings a week or something like that? Because we are also kind of early in the process.
I think 2 meetings a week would make sense, like Monday and Friday.
Are those the days you tend to work on this?
Currently, Monday and first half of Tuesday are the days that I work the most consistently on it, but it's pretty low sample size. I'm adjusting my schedule around since I didn't have consistent work before this. So Thursday is the day that I'm least likely to be working on it. And beyond that, I'm fairly flexible.
Yeah, I'm just thinking though, if you're working on Monday and Tuesday, it'd probably be good to have something like in the middle of your day on Monday-ish, right? So that you could do a little work. You could have a meeting, do a little work. I don't know.
Like if we had a meeting on Friday, then that would be basically prepping for the start of the next week.
Yeah, it just so if we so we're not, if we do Fridays and Mondays, we're not gonna have 2 meetings without you having any work in between.
Sorry,
Either way.
I meant Tuesday, because the Tuesday morning
Okay.
time is a really good time for meeting for me.
Okay.
I was just saying the wrong day.
Okay, so if it's Tuesday, but if it's Tuesday morning, are you, so you're gonna still do a little bit more work on this today, basically, right?
Yeah, today's a little bit, like I'll still do a bit more. I'll start the reorganizing process, but I do have a birthday event today that's not going to be recurring.
Yeah, and well, you're a contractor, so flexibility.
Mhm.
Controlling your own time is a big deal. So, yeah. Tuesday and Friday meetings.
Yeah, I'm about at 15 hours of work total right now.
For 2 weeks?
Basically since I got hired. So it's technically, this is the 3rd week that's included, but the first week I didn't do a whole lot.
Okay. So yeah, so this time's still good for Tuesdays. Do you have an idea on the time on Fridays? I'm pretty flexible.
Let me double check my calendar. Nine on Friday. So the same time on Friday would be good.
Actually, let's just do that right now. Then we'll just add Friday as a day. Custom Tuesday and Friday. And we could also have these meetings be longer. We're over time, but I don't think you mind.
Yeah, I mean, it is helpful. I just want to make sure we don't end up in a situation where we have a whole lot of meeting time that isn't as productive
Yeah.
just because it's easy to keep talking.
Of course, we could always cut it short. It's easy. It's probably easier if I block off the time and then don't use it. But let's see how it goes.
Yeah, I do want to get to that question since we're moving past the point
right.
where it's relevant. So when I end up in a situation where I have multiple studies that reach a similar conclusion, would feel incorrect for that just to be another or quote or reference on a single point, even though they're in the end saying something very similar for what the top level claim is, because they're looking at data in a different way. It's just that the end thing they say is the same. Would we want those to be like a single chain of things agreeing with each other? Would we want there to be some sort of weighting for things that have multiple sourcing on a single point?
Yeah, so what I would think is that you would make the claim that exists in multiple papers, and then you put them each paper is separately underneath that claim. So the claim itself being weighted against other claims in that same row. So it'll still have the weight of just a one claim for its parents, but there will be multiple child. First of all, so people can see all the different studies that do it. But if someone comes in and debunks one of the studies, the other two will stand. Now, we might also say, well, 3 studies is better than 1. Although, a meta study of 10 studies is better than 1. So we would look at the weighting kind of separately. So in general, I'd say, yeah, group the studies into the single claim that they make on.
Okay.
As long as you don't work into that already.
Yeah, the weighting and how we use that is something that I don't feel I have a good grasp on right now.
Yeah, I think if we get these organized the way you want, and then if you look at the, run the weighting scores, and then we can talk about adjusting them if they seem inappropriate.
Yeah, ideally we would have it set up in a way so that the weighting happens just programmatically, that it's more or less automatic based off of how the data is entered, rather than us having to manually decide that something has a higher weight or lower based off of how it's set up.
It does actually automatically assign the weights. The thing is that sometimes we haven't put in all the reasons. So like if let's say there were 2 studies, one found it was true, one found it was false on the same claim. One's a meta study of 10 studies, the other one's, a study by someone who didn't report their data. Well, I guess you would just debunk the one where they didn't report the data. But let's say one was a smaller study of like 10 people and one was a study of 1,000 people, right? There would be no way for the system to know that the other study is more reliable, the one with the larger data.
Yeah, that's true. And there isn't a programmatic way to handle that.
Right. So what we'd have to do is manually go under that study and put a pro importance on it, saying this study is 100 people, or go to the other one and say the study is this has 1,000 people, or go to the other one and say this one has 100 people, or both, right? And that's the type of thing is where the default way it does weighting is okay, but it doesn't have all the information, and then we have to come in and put more information. And also sometimes you'll want to organize the claims to be easy to read. You might want to group all these things that are very similar under a certain heading. But when you do that, it will change the weighting, because that top heading, if you had 4 items up at the top and you group them under one, it now is only one compared to the other claims that are in there. So then we might have to make adjustments. But most of the time when you're grouping, it'll be because the claims they're building up to the same thing. But sometimes it can have weird effects. And we may have to adjust based on that. But most of the time it'll be us saying this is more important than the other ones or less important because X.
Yeah. Would there be any consideration in that? I mean, this would probably be an after the 5 initial claims and launch job, since it's looking more into the future. But would there be any consideration of establishing metrics for what sorts of sources should in general receive what sorts of weighting?
Well, yeah, especially for studies, it'd be nice to say, is this a randomly controlled trial? What's the size of the population? What's the p-value? And have a kind of a metric thing. So at least when we're having people input data, they have a resource to look at. But I don't think I would ever code that. I mean, you might code a shortcut in the system that would build it out, but it'd always be able to be adjusted, because sometimes we'd say, oh, this is low information because there's not a random controlled trials. But there are some things you can't do a random controlled trial on. And it's kind of like, well, this is as good as we're ever going to get. Let's let it stay the full strength. Although there's another thought saying, well, we'll never be 100% sure about this because we can't do a random control trial. And we shouldn't say 100% unless we are 100%, right? So we have to think about that. But yes, it'd be later on. It'd be nice to have some kind of prescribed ways of thinking through the weights of things and adding them in, and then later, far future, you could build those into the system. Yeah.
Okay, I think that answers that enough for me for now.
Yeah. Any other questions coming up, or?
That was the main question I had noted down. I just have a notes document that I'm throwing things in as I think of them, so I don't forget about it later.
Yeah, it's great. It's a good habit. Also, feel free to in the meeting agendas, if you ever want to we should be making. I did not.
It was a specific enough thing that I didn't want to add to the agenda this time.
Yeah.
The last time I did.
All
right, I think we should probably keep moving through the agenda because we are less than halfway and it's already an hour and a half in.
Well, yeah. Yeah, let's hit some of these. And I might start organizing these for the quicker ones or at the top. So I think we've reviewed the qualified immunity. I was supposed to kind of find a contract for contractors. And I started looking for one, but I hadn't chosen one. If you have any suggested ones, let me know.
The only ones I would have would be ones that are very in-depth and that I wouldn't be able to vouch for the legal language in it. My suspicion is that for the moment, the level that's at, just something that is very simple, not legally reviewed, but still establishing intent in writing is going to be sufficient for what we're using.
Yeah.
We're at a position where we are basing a notable portion of this on our trust, because it only really stops once you hit a point where you involve lawyers in the phrasing, and that sounds way too expensive.
Yeah, I'll go through and find it. I think there's some good kind of generic ones that then let you kind of put in.
Very possibly. I wouldn't have seen them before though. So we chose Slack, and maybe we should just stay with that now that I'm thinking about it. I was thinking later on that it may be something more of a community thing where we're actually having people that are passionate about
about debate and misinformation and have a community site. And so it'd be nice if that was just in Discord, not Slack, because I think it's, I
Yeah,
think,
that seems, if it's successful enough that we have a community that builds up, then probably it's worthwhile differentiating the work tasking in Slack versus the community engagement in Discord.
oh, so you think it's okay to keep them separate? Or,
I would think so, but it depends on the philosophy behind it.
yeah, I'd almost rather have one just so I can think about this app has everything I need for this project.
Okay, in that case, probably Discord, because it's just way more likely for people to be able to easily join.
Yeah.
I know as a casual user, if I see something has their community on Slack, I'm just not going to go. Whereas Discord, I'm like much more likely to.
Okay. Now the other option is Mattermost, which
I've never heard of it.
Yeah, and actually this is a very specific Mattermost I'm thinking. So there's an open global mind group and they have a Mattermost server, and Mattermost is pretty much a kind of Discord Slack open source alternative.
Yep.
It wouldn't be as easy for a community, but what's great is there that we would have a community there that we can engage with. Which I'm not going to pull it up on the screen because we're recording and some of those messages are private.
A quick look at it says that it looks like it's probably perfectly functional. But if we're hoping that people who are casually engaged will join, they're not going to install a new app in order to do so.
Yeah, yeah.
There's
so
significant
Discord would be
benefit.
better.
Yeah, there's significant
that.
benefit in the one that we're more likely to already be engaged with.
Yeah. We might still, so in the open global mind community, it's still, or in the, actually it's, what is that, CSC? I can't remember. It's a community that uses Mattermost, and they as a, it's actually multiple communities coming together. So I'll be engaging in that community at some point. We might have a single channel in there we'll talk to that community about because they're very much in all this stuff. Yeah. Okay. So I wanted to talk through with that. Let me spend a little bit more time thinking about that. Oh, and I did add the scoring algorithm to Airtable, although I need to figure out that reversible thing. Anyways, I was thinking about putting, and I guess there's not much of a discussion about this, but about starting to run this kind of like an official nonprofit and start asking people to be on the board.
My initial thought is that feels like a later issue rather than a now issue, but
yeah, that might be true. I guess I just ran into someone that made me think about it, but that's a good point. We're still kind of experimenting. That'd probably be better after.
yeah, I mean, if we're at the point where we're going to get 5 things done, do a beta launch, and be very open to the possibility that it just doesn't get engagement and we don't move forward, then putting in a lot of work to build up a board seems like it would be
Yeah,
optimistic.
I think that's a good point. Yep. Yeah, because I don't really have any questions or decisions for the board right now. We just need to get the experiment out. We discussed meeting length and frequency, so I think we're good there. So I did put some tasks necessary to launch Gulli Bot. I might just ask you to at some point take a look at the tasks under beta launch and see if there's anything you'd suggest. And next when we meet on Friday, just let me know if you had any other ideas of things that we need to kind of do before the launch.
I think that several of these points are all contingent on having a social media person.
Yeah, like the social media plan.
And the explainer video and demo video, I think would want to run primarily through them. Since the point of
Oh,
social,
yeah.
the point of those videos would, I think, be to drive engagement. Like, yes, being able to concisely explain it is important, but if the explanation is getting people to tune out, it will have failed at the most important element of it.
Yeah, I guess though it depends on what type of social media person.
Yeah, and I'm not good at social media. I'm aware of this. I've had projects before where that was an issue, which was frustrating, but I recognize it's the case.
Yeah.
And having somebody who knows what they are doing with it is going to help clarify a lot about how we would approach any of the launch.
Yeah. Okay, so I might reach out to a social media person. I have someone in mind that I'm going to try sooner rather than later.
Yeah. Would we want a time frame on this? Getting the social media person honestly sounds like a right away thing so that they can have input about how we will approach that. But
yeah,
oh, go on.
I think we'll be able to determine a timeline once we get like 3 debate topics kind of done, because we'll know how fast we're going and how much rework. I'm kind of hesitant to say right now. Well, and they might extend it if making a video or a demo video, but I want you and me to have a good feel for how long is it going to take us to get 5 of these things together and feel like they're pretty solid. So that'll be one of the inputs into that schedule.
Yeah, and that's going to take a more dedicated conversation about topics that we're using, which sounds like that's probably going to be the primary agenda for this Friday.
Yeah, I think so.
Like I'll spend the rest of the week fleshing out the 2 that I have, and probably honestly mostly reorganizing them into a better format, figuring out how best to paraphrase or group things so that makes sense as a back and forth debate.
Yep.
It's one of those tasks that in a sense I don't like it, since the end result is that not a lot looks like it changes. It's more spending time thinking about what is there than putting things there.
Yeah, it's one of those things. Doesn't have a high kind of emotional reward to it.
Yeah, in a sense, I don't mind doing that sort of thing. It just feels a little more awkward when I'm getting paid to do that thing, because it doesn't feel like I'm doing as much. It's not as tangible.
Right. Yeah. But that is part of the job, and I understand.
It's absolutely necessary. That was more just me expressing thoughts as I was having them.
Yeah. So what do we want to call that? Discuss debate topics again?
Yeah. I think it's establish the 5 launch topics.
Yeah, that's good. Okay, cool. All right, so you feel like you got enough to do between now and Friday?
Yeah, I mean, I have about 4.5 hours of work to hit the 20-hour threshold, basically for 2 weeks, and then didn't do much for that first week.
Okay. Yeah.
So,
and be sure and leave room for the meeting on Friday.
oh yeah, true. Okay, so about 3.5 hours of it.
Yeah, that'd be good. All right. Well, cool. Then I will talk to you on Friday.
All right. I will see you then. Have an excellent rest of your week.
You too. Bye.
Bye-bye.